Hello, hello. Welcome to Nice Hog Live. We are doing a screenwriting mechanics class tonight, and we will do formal introductions and the like as folks trickle in. So for now, we're just going to hang tight, cut it up in the chat with y'all if you would like, and we will start the class in about 15 minutes or so as people on in. The proverbial doors are open.
For those who are here, do you want to maybe speak a little bit about, what inspired you to do this, or even just like, what the plan is, what they can expect, or anything really?
Yeah, so I had this idea of, doing a class like this for a while now, actually. The idea was I really, through the course of my career in the entertainment industry and then just being kind of a public-facing person who does networking events and talks on panels and all that kind of stuff, I was meeting with a lot of emerging writers and talented folks, sometimes further along in their careers than I am, sometimes, just taking their first steps as a real writer. And I'm in a few different groups, a few different writers' workshop groups. One group that is a little bit more about, it's more of like a writer's social hour. It's about career and marketing and long-term strategy. And I'm in a couple other groups that are more comedy specific. And it was kind of helping as I would meet new writers. People would ask me, well, what should I do? Are there groups I should get involved with? And I would refer to them to these other, these workshop groups, things that I'm a part of and that I'm an active member of. And I kind of felt like there was a missed opportunity that when people are asking me personally, they're saying, Frankie, what resources should I be taking advantage of to further either develop a community as a writer or, develop my craft? I started to feel a little bit guilty about sending them to these groups that are run by my friends, things that I'm a big fan of and I'm an active supporter of, but things where, it was kind of out of my hands. It wasn't anything I was organizing. It was just a thing that I'm an active participant of. There's one group that I'm a member of that is the social hour kind of thing, where I'd say the bulk of the active members are people I've handpicked, personally recruited into that group. And so it kind of became a thing where it was like, well, I should have something to offer people myself. I don't need to necessarily funnel people into these other things. Like, certainly I can offer them that, but I also should be able to offer them something of my own that I'm doing to build community, especially if I'm kind of like this central node and people are digging in. And so I thought, let's try something like that. And so even before we really started to have this big push, the past couple months of taking Nice Hog to the next level, I had this idea of this is something I could build, and it's a thing that I would find fulfillment out of just doing it and connecting with folks. I like helping people get better, and I like learning and growing myself too. It's the kind of thing that I would be pursuing this kind of stuff even for an audience of nobody, even if I was just like doing it for my own sake to get better as a writer. So that idea was starting to form. I wanted to kind of have a place where I can tell people. I wanted to have a thing that I could do and draw an audience for. And ultimately, as we started to ramp things up with Nice Hog, it also was a really great kind of parlay into, well, we should have this be some Nice Hog kind of branded content and do it live on Twitch and have it be this thing where folks can kind of interact live and engage with us live, have it be this collaborative kind of session. And then we'll also have the VOD to post later so that if folks can't make it or they want to go back and review the material or they want to share it with someone else who maybe is thinking about screenwriting for the first time, we want to be able to have that content and build a community around that. And one of the big, like, long-term goals with Nice Hog is just to let people know who we are and what we do and connect with emerging filmmakers and screenwriters and build a community of like-minded creatives. It doesn't necessarily mean horror comedy all the time. So I was open to just kind of kicking it off and doing the damn thing. So yeah, we are grateful for everyone who's tuning in. Folks who are watching this on the VOD, thanks for being here as well. We appreciate you, and we hope that you get something out of the class, even though you're not watching live. And if you are watching live, by all means, hit us up in the chat if you've got questions, comments. If you want to just be a part of it. The goal here is to have this be a really interactive stream, and not just be a lecture. And certainly, like you'll see as we get into the material, I'm going to be focusing on what people smarter than me have to say about character introductions and what to do and what not to do, and the different considerations that you might have as you're writing your own. So it's definitely not going to be geared towards just here's how I would do it individually, or here are examples from my work. It's all going to be examples from produced screenplays or screenplays that were on the blacklist. So it's going to be, we're looking at top shelf material tonight, folks. And if you're interested in sharing your own, or you want to workshop something, or you have questions, by all means, we will be happy to engage. And we'll give it a couple more minutes as folks trickle in, and then we will kick things off.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. And thank you for going through the effort of putting this together. This presentation you're about to see was all crafted for this specifically, and I think Frankie did a really great job. And for anyone joining in, please feel free to, comment if you have any questions, or if there's any interaction you have, in the future for us, Frankie. This is a collaborative, interactive thing, so let us know, and we'll have people standing by. In the meantime, we'll give it a few more minutes, like Frankie said, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you guys so much.
I love you too, Big Mikey. That's a first-time chatter. I like that it tells me that, first-time chatter. I hope to see a lot of first-time chatter tonight. This is Steve's brother. Oh, what's up, Michael? Great to see you. Thanks for being here. I'm going to give you a special shout-out. You've been kicking so much ass lately. Steve's been sharing the updates. Great. Really proud of you, and excited that you're kind of interested in the filmmaking stuff that we're doing. We'd love to cast you in something one day. Hopefully this will be a fun interactive lesson, and I don't know, maybe you'll get the bug, the filmmaking bug. I might say a lot of crazy stuff as I just have to fill the air before we really kick things off. Nah, this will be the more interesting part of the stream, the very beginning, where it's just vamping and completely unscripted rambles. But then once the class starts, I'll lock in. Michael is going to write the next best Nice Hog. I agree. I think so. I think he really is. All right. I think it's getting to be that time, Carson.
I think so.
If you're here, this is Nice Hog Presents Screenwriting Mechanics. This is our first session. It's going to be a free, interactive, and inclusive workshop. And, this is aimed at writers of all levels. If you've never written any screenwriting before, your first time, you're going to learn some stuff. If you're a seasoned pro, just looking for a refresher on some of those core fundamentals, you're going to get that here too. If you have questions for us at any time, pop them in the chat. We would love to engage with our audience. This is not meant to just be me lecturing y'all, but in fact, a fluid kind of conversation. And we've designed parts of the presentation tonight to have audience participation. So I hope that everyone is excited. If you need to use the bathroom or get a beverage, now would be a great time, because the next section is going to be a little bit of just like introductions. And if you know me already, you know what I'm going to say. So we are Nice Hog Productions. Our website is nice-hog.com. You can find our socials there if you're interested in following us. We love to connect with fans. We'll follow you back. There's just like a little placeholder slide as we kick things off. So we'll see it again later. Obviously, y'all know that our Twitch is twitch.tv/NiceHogLive. Be sure to follow us here to see when we're doing streams. We do classes like this. We do pop-up game streams. We just hang out sometimes. It's all a little bit new as we're just trying to build out a community and draw more attention to our projects and let folks get to know us a little bit more. All right. So, who we are. Nice Hog Productions is an award-winning multidisciplinary creative collective founded in 2014. We've been doing this for 10 years. Our primary focus is in writing, developing, and producing high-quality comedy and horror projects for film, television, and print, which includes comic books, novels, a little bit of everything. I am writer, comedian, and filmmaker Frankie Campisano. I'm one of the founding members of Nice Hog. I have worked in the industry for 10 years, including time at NBC Universal, Sony Pictures Classics, Jigsaw Productions, Fox Broadcasting Company. As a freelance scripted development analyst, I've worked with clients including the Austin Film Festival, Alta Global Media, Branded Pictures Entertainment, and more. Our most recent Nice Hog short film is a project called Secret Menu Beauty Pageant. It is currently playing in film festivals worldwide. We just got word this morning our latest film festival acceptance is for the Inland Independent Film Festival in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So that rules. I'm very excited to be able to share that film, and one day everyone will be able to see it. But for now, it's playing in festivals, and if you're really interested, reach out to us and we can arrange private viewing. So that's who we are and why we're doing this. But let's learn from folks who kind of know more than I do. Let's ask the experts. So here's how this is going to go. I don't want y'all to think that this is just me pulling things out of thin air or information that is conjecture. I actually have gone to look at what do people who are more qualified, more experienced, more talented than me say about character introductions. The do's, the don'ts, the things to keep in mind as we're crafting our own. And so first up, we're going to hear from John August. John August is a screenwriter. He wrote the movie Go, among many other films. He's also the host, or one of the hosts, of the Script Notes podcast, which is one of the best screenwriting podcasts. When I thought, who are the experts I wanted to kind of draw on for this, John August was the first name that I thought of. Says he's asked about character introductions as the context for this, and he says, just how early can you tell that a script isn't going to work? He says it's as the first few characters are introduced. If a character introductions are not done artfully, the odds of anything else in the script being great are slim. I don't think that's hyperbole, folks. I think John hit the nail on the head. I take it even further, personally, and say that the title of a project is the first time that you can engage if a script is going to work or not, or at least have the first inkling of if that's going to be successful or not, because the title is the first creative choice that the writer is making. It's the first insight into how they operate. But we're not talking about titles tonight, folks. We're talking about character introductions. So all else being equal, character introductions are your first opportunity creatively to make an impression on your audience, to connect with a reader if your project is a screenplay that is not yet produced, and also to kind of just set the stakes. This is the kinds of creative decisions I'm going to be making and what you can expect from the rest of this project. Sometimes that's a 110-page, 120-page screenplay, and they're not going to get to page 100 if you don't hook them. And one of the biggest elements is characters. A good script, or a good scene even, is interesting people doing interesting things in interesting places. So, how do you craft an interesting person? Well, Scott Myers from the Go Into the Story blog, which is a blog that is sponsored by The Blacklist, which is an annual screenwriting. It's both a screenwriting feedback service, but the annual Blacklist is compiled by managers, producers, agents about their favorite scripts that they read that year that were not produced or purchased by someone to make it happen. Recent films that have been on the Blacklist in years past, The Menu was a Blacklist script. This upcoming film, Daddy-O from Sony Classics, starring Dakota Johnson, that was a blacklist script. So it gives you a great sense of what writers are doing to break out in the industry, and it also gives you a great sense of, okay, this script had buzz in 2016, and now 8 years later in 2024, it's a movie that you can see in theaters. That's really helpful to put into perspective how long these things can take. Anyway, Scott says, the single best thing you can do is to ground character introduction in action, something visual, memorable, and preferably reflecting the individual's personality, station in life, etc. Use action to convey a thumbnail sketch of who they are. You can also use a few key lines of scene description to get across some key elements of a character's persona. Now that's an incredibly important thing that he's saying there, because most folks are going to tell you, do not put anything in your action description in a screenplay that you cannot see or hear on screen as an audience member seated in the theater. And that is right about 99.9% of the time. I'll argue that 0.1%, 0.01%, when you can play with that, is when you're introducing a character, especially if that character is your protagonist. You do have the ability there to kind of slow down time and dig in a little bit deeper and give us some of that character establishing detail that might not necessarily be immediately apparent on screen or in the scene work, but for a reader is going to do a lot of heavy lifting to get them invested in this character. So let's look at what you kind of need to weigh as like what are the things you're trying to convey with your character introduction. Jason Hellerman of No Film School breaks it down into 5 categories. Some of these are going to be pretty obvious. The basics. We want to know the character's name, their age, their role in the story. Probably you should also include sex here and understand that readers will make assumptions about your character's sex or gender based on the name. And so to the degree that you can weigh that when you're making that creative decision, just keep that in mind. It is all about the psychological game between writer and reader or next stakeholder even. As the screenwriter, you're seeing a movie in your head. You're trying to get that down on paper in a way that if someone else were to read it and then direct that script, what they're going to produce, hopefully, ideally, gets as close to the vision that you had in your head when you were writing it. And so a lot of the decisions you'll make on the page, as far as the look and structure of your action description or your dialogue, the rhythm of the writing on the page is with that intention of, is this conveying the movie I'm seeing in my head? Visual impression of a character, physical description, body language, the style of dress, the setting and context in which we're first meeting them. Maybe they have an iconic prop or an iconic costume. For instance, the driver, Ryan Gosling's character in the movie Drive, doesn't even have a name, but he's got that sick scorpion jacket, and we really remember that look. That's an iconic look for a character who doesn't have a name even. It's a way to make the character really distinct. Action beats, the first action, the defining moments of when we see that character, that's super important. That's going to be, interesting people doing interesting things in interesting places. So that visual impression, those action beats, that's going to take into consideration, is your interesting character doing an interesting thing in an interesting place? Is it something that we have seen before? Is it something that we maybe haven't seen before? Is it something, do you set up expectations that are something familiar and maybe that we might have expectations about, and then you subvert those expectations? Up to you. Character voice is going to be another big one. Here he suggests having a key quote for your character. This doesn't have to necessarily be a line of dialogue that they are outright saying. This could be a mantra. This could be a line that kind of sums up their vibe or their worldview. You have a little bit of flexibility here. But also the first lines of dialogue that the character does say, that is going to be very memorable. And for the experience of the viewer, really going to be memorable. Sometimes they might even hear the character's voice before they see the character, for instance. And then, of course, the intangibles. This is what I was kind of referring to on the previous slide with the ideas of being able to slow things down and expand beyond just what you're going to see necessarily or hear on screen. You have a little bit of space to play with overall vibe, the emotional impression of a character, the degree to which the character's introduction is setting up your story's hook or central mystery. And we're going to dig into more specific examples of all of this over the course of the night. But I just wanted to give that breakdown of 5 different things that you're going to be kind of looking for in any character introduction. So we've looked at kind of what makes one work, right? Now, what are the things you have to bear in mind to avoid making those easy mistakes or common kind of pitfalls? Michael Hogg of Story Mastery says, the most common weakness of character descriptions is that they generalize. The details are broad, vague, or not visual at all. They neither create a specific image, nor do they reveal anything important or emotionally involving about the character. If the audience is not invested in your character, they're not going to be invested in your story. They're not going to be invested in the character's wants and needs and interactions with the other members of the cast. Like, it all kind of snowballs. If you can get the audience invested in your main character through a memorable introduction, they're going to want to go places with that character. A great example would be The Big Lebowski. The dude, Jeff Bridges' character, is so specifically crafted that it's kind of okay that he's, for the most part, somewhat inert in the beginning. The plot kind of comes to him. But the character's so specific and memorable and fun that you buy yourself some of that goodwill, and the audience will go with you and stay with you while they're waiting for the story to kick into that high gear. Now, Michael goes on to dig into one of the things that you really need to be mindful of. And we see emerging writers do this a lot. If you define your character only by their function, i.e. a boss, a mother, a teenager, a customer, it's hard to picture a specific individual. And if it's hard to picture a specific individual, it's hard to care about that character. You want your audience to care about that character. And it is also true he goes on to say, if you summarize, instead of giving the character a personality or a conflict, you give with no visible evidence, you kind of have nothing to, like, it's okay to have your audience connecting the dots and arriving at conclusions that you haven't necessarily spelled out for them, but that you want them to put 2 and 2 together and get 4. That is a screenwriting technique that folks are definitely very interested in. I do see that we are about to have a quick ad break, so we can hang for a minute through the ad break, if y'all do not mind. If we have any questions at this point in the chat, feel free to throw them in. We've got a few more slides of information from the experts before we get into the fun part, which is checking out the produced screenplays. Movies that y'all will have probably seen, and then some that you definitely haven't because they haven't been produced yet. All right, cool. Well, thanks for coming back. I guess you could hear us through the ad break, which is great. So, not a problem. So, first impressions matter. The way that the audience meets your characters will put an idea into their head about what kind of person that is, and it's hard to break out of that first impression. Great example from Doug Ebach, screenwriter and writer of the Let's Schmooze blog, is there's a reason Indiana Jones is introduced as the swashbuckling adventurer before we see him as the slightly bewildered college professor. Swashbuckling adventurer, interesting, engaging. Again, interesting person doing an interesting thing in an interesting place. And then the slightly bewildered college professor, now that's not interesting on its own, you know? In a vacuum, that's almost a stock character. But when you introduce us to the swashbuckling adventurer and then show us this other side of him, now that's interesting. Now that's something we hadn't seen before. It's a very specific, it's a complication to this character. That's the thing, is like, as you build out aspects of your character over the course of your story, it doesn't all have to be in just the introduction. You'll build a fully rounded person, an individual with real characterization. For example, Indiana Jones, swashbuckling adventurer, bewildered college professor, but then we also see him as love interest, as historian, as a son, as a father. We get these other aspects of him that expand the scope of our understanding of the character. But it's the first introduction, swashbuckling adventurer, that sells us on the story, sells us on the hook, and gives the writer the goodwill with the audience to then show us this arguably less interesting side as the professor. It's more interesting because of what we've already seen. If you flip that order, you might not keep the audience's attention to get to the point of revealing that this mild-mannered professor is actually a swashbuckling adventurer. You have to kind of do it in the way that, like, it's a similar thing, to go on a slight tangent, would be like horror movie rhythms. When you do that jump scare, you then buy yourself a lot of time for things to get more quiet and less dynamic and maybe more expository. But then you ramp back up with another scare. So there's like a rhythm to it all. And that's true, it's a microcosm of everything. It's true even in the character introductions. So Doug goes on to talk about a few different ways you actually can introduce characters pragmatically. The first is advertising. You advertise the character by having other characters talk about them, anticipating their appearance. The audience is anxious to meet this fascinating individual. A great example would be Pulp Fiction. We hear about Marcellus Wallace. We hear about Marcellus Wallace's wife. Both of those characters, when they appear in the movie later, they're 10 times more interesting because we've already hyped them up and we're interested in getting to know them, and we have a context for their relationships with the other characters purely just based on the quote-unquote advertising of scenes where, even though they're not present, they still loom large over the characters who we are introduced to. Another way is to do physical entrance. Have a character dramatically appear on screen. Or, like he says in a comedy, they might stumble into a room where they're not supposed to be, and then everything screeches to a halt. You have a lot of different ways to have the actual physical introduction of a character be what's memorable. A good example would be McLovin in Superbad. He walks up to them. He walks up to Seth and Evan. He says the chicka chicka yeah line and starts bragging about the fake ID. Very different energy to what we've seen in the movie up to that point. The physicality of Fogel as like this nerd compared to our already nerdy main characters adds another layer. It puts him in a context of, if our main two duo are these two losers, this is who they think is a loser. But he's their loser. So physical entrance, physical appearance of a character is another great way to have a memorable introduction. And then there's one more, because there's always a secret third option. And in this case, the secret third option is the delayed reveal. The idea of setting up your character, not so that they're not introduced, but that it's not immediately clear that that character is your protagonist. The obvious, big example for this is Alien. You don't necessarily know that Ripley is the main character of Alien. You know because you've picked it up in pop culture over the years, but at the time, audiences didn't know that Sigourney Weaver was the actual lead of that movie. She was not the biggest name on the call sheet. But by creating this idea of de-emphasizing your actual protagonist, you can create stakes where you don't know who's going to live or die. Another great example would be the movie Barbarian. For the first 40 minutes, that movie is a two-hander. It is two actors sharing almost 100% of their screen time together. And then at the 40-minute mark, there's a dramatic twist, and you're then introduced to another new character, and the story shifts. And because of the way that it's built in the narrative, you're not expecting that hard cut to a new location, and it gives the movie's second act this really renewed momentum. And it really works. And again, it's a very specific deployment for things like this. There's a time to do it and a time where it's not necessarily serving the project as best as it could, but it's something to keep in your back pocket, something to also look out for when you're watching movies. You will catch movies doing stuff like this as you see more things and kind of know the tools in the writer's toolbox. Now, we've got one more expert that we're going to look at, and this is an expert that I am quite fond of, a gentleman by the name of Scott Winfield Sublett, who wrote the book Screenwriting for Neurotics, which is my personal screenwriting Bible. I love this book. I think he breaks things down in a fantastic way. If I was smart, I'd have an Amazon affiliate link for everyone to go purchase the movie or the book and give us a credit. But Scott writes, the trick to introducing characters is giving a vivid impression of them as quickly as possible, without telling too much or too little. When the character walks in, what kind of an impression do they make? Again, first impressions are everything here. And he caveats that with, writing elaborate character descriptions can fool writers into thinking they've done the job of characterization when they haven't. That's a huge pitfall. That should be a neon sign. Your character introduction is not a shortcut to characterization. It's in service of characterization, but you still need to do characterization. As Scott puts really succinctly, show us who this character is in scenes of conflict. Don't just tell us via narration or via action description. Scott also breaks down, and this is a great example of why I love screenwriting for neurotics, because he digs into a lot of myths that folks have. So the myth of the pet the dog scene. If you're unfamiliar with the concept of the pet the dog scene, it's this idea of you will see the main character stop and pet a dog. Not because it moves the story forward, but because it shows that he's a nice guy and he likes dogs and everybody likes dogs. And Scott says some people think you have permission to kind of do one scene that establishes your character as a genuinely good guy, even if it's not moving the plot or the story forward. He says no. You need to expose your hero's character in a scene of conflict that moves the story forward. Purely expository scenes are boring no matter where in the script they occur. And so I think what the takeaway there is, even when you're introducing your main character, you can and should be considering introducing this character in conflict. Either with other characters, with their environment, with their current status quo. In some way, this character, every scene really, should have conflict. It shouldn't feel static. And so now we've looked at the do's and don'ts. We've listened to what folks who know better than I have to say. Let's look at some examples from produced screenplays. First example, some of these I'm going to have a little bit of a game, but some of these are pretty obvious what scene the movie's from, so I didn't redact anything. This first one obviously is from The Matrix by Lillian Lana Wachowski. Interior Neo's apartment. It is a studio apartment that seems overgrown with technology. Weed-like cables coil everywhere, duct taped into thickets that wind up and around the legs of several desks. Tabletops are filled with cannibalized equipment that lay open like an autopsied corpse. We turn toward the center of this rat nest of technology, following the slurping and crunching of cereal. We pass an open box of Captain Crunch as we find Neo, a younger man who knows more about living inside a computer than living outside one. Neo says, "Fucking idiots don't know shit." He finishes his cereal and is about to disconnect when an anonymous message slices onto the screen. It reads, "Do you want to know what the Matrix is, Neo?" Neo is frozen when he reads his name. Screen. On screen, Superastic says, "Who said that?" Jackin says, "Who's Neo?" Gibson says, "This is a private board. If you want to know, follow the White Rabbit." Neo says, "What the hell?" Screen says, Timax, "Someone is hacking the hackers. It's Morpheus. Identify yourself." Knock, knock, Neo. A chill runs down his spine, and when someone knocks on his door, he almost jumps out of his chair. He looks at the door, then back at the computer, but the message is gone. Now, that is a phenomenal scene. We are introduced to Neo. We don't get any sort of physical description of him at all, actually, very curiously. We get that he's a younger man. That's good enough. That is enough for casting to work with. But a man who knows more about living inside a computer than living outside one characterizes him as this hacker, characterizes him as this person kind of who feels a layer removed from the world that he's engaging with. On top of that, it's a microcosm of spoilers for The Matrix. He absolutely knows more about living inside a computer than living outside one because he has yet to wake up from The Matrix. Then we immediately get a need, wanting to know what The Matrix is, a hook. We don't know yet. The audiences for the first time did not know what The Matrix was. That was part of the pitch of the movie, was learning. And then there's this hook where the world of the computer is impacting his real world. All of this is a one-page scene that is giving you the blueprint for the movie and setting up Neo, and we care about what's going to happen to him. We're curious. Why did someone knock on his door? Then the message is gone. One of the things that you're always going to want to think about, and I encourage folks to think about it through every example tonight, is weighing the consideration. The audience should be asking, what's going to happen next? You never want them asking, what's going on? Because that means they're confused and they're not invested. With this page, when there's the knock at the door and then the message is gone, you want to know what's going to happen next. What is Neo going to do? Great example. Again, The Matrix, written by Lana and Lily Wachowski, one of the strongest screenplays in modern sci-fi. And it's crazy to say modern sci-fi for a film that came out almost 30 years ago. So our next example here, another one that is not redacted. You might recognize it immediately. You might not. It's not quite as iconic a scene as the other one. And in fact, this is actually not even our main character's introduction. Rose to Chris says, "That's the groundskeeper. I think his name is Walter." Rose parks in front of the house. And so you'll see that some of these scripts have typos. Even produced screenplays, when writer-directors are writing for themselves, sometimes things don't get caught. He has a pleasant smile. Rose gets out of the car and waves. "Hi." Walter turns and waves back. Chris gets out and waves too. "Hey, what's up?" Walter waves silently. Odd. As Chris gets the luggage from the trunk, Rose runs to the front door and rings the doorbell. Footsteps. The door swings open, revealing Dean Armitage, 59, a tall, balding, barrel-chested bear hug of a man. Though clearly smart, Dean has an endearing cockiness and a bad case of dad humor. He is the kind of guy who pronounces garbage, garbage. Now, I'll pause for a moment to break down that character introduction. So we get some physicality of Dean. We get his age. We get tall, balding, barrel-chested bear hug of a man. That is both fun to read, fun to say, and we can all picture exactly what that description is telling us. Now we get elements that are personality, vibe kind of stuff, the emotional impression of the character that we're not necessarily going to see in a physicality sense, but an actor is going to bring to their performance. And for the purpose of a reader who wants to know, why do I care about this character, they understand exactly what it means, that he is the type of person that uses a bad case of dad humor and pronounces it garbage. Sabrina in the chat says, "A vocal performance tick that reveals a mindset and history." Yes, 100%. That is really telling about this character. Let's move on. And Missy Armitage, 56, a beautiful beacon of intellectual patience. She is poised and warm, relaxed and in control. They stand in the shadows of the doorway smiling. Rose hugs her parents. "Hi. There's my girl. Hello, sweetheart. I miss you guys." "We miss you too, Roro." Chris approaches with the bags. "Hi. Chris, these are my parents. Mom, Dad, this is Chris." So if you saw on the next slide, this is from Get Out, written by Jordan Peele. The parents in Get Out are two of the bigger antagonists of the film, and thus their introductions are super, super important. We get a lot from these characters. We get the kind of faux friendliness of Dean. We get the relaxed and in control and potential from Missy, who is a little bit more ominous of a character pretty quickly. They stand in the shadows of the doorway smiling. That's such a specific detail. Placing those two characters in shadow, one, it's a decision made on the page that even if Jordan Peele was not to direct his own script in this instance, that's a framing thing that, hopefully that vision of the movie he's seeing in his head, by saying they stand in the shadows of the doorway smiling, a director and a cinematographer interprets that line and presents that image on screen fairly close to what he had in his mind. Great example. I wanted to show y'all something that wasn't just like page one main character introduction. Now we get to a little bit more fun part of the class. I'm going to show you some examples with the character names blacked out, redacted. And I want to see if folks can guess from the script and from this scene if they know what movie this is. 405 Freeway, Los Angeles, early evening. Christmas tinsel on the light poles. We are looking east, past Inglewood, into the orange grid of LA at night, when suddenly we tilt up to catch the huge belly of a landing 747. The noise is deafening. Interior 747, passengers, same. The usual moment just after landing when you let out that sigh of relief that you've made it in one piece. As the plane taxis to its gate, they stir, gather personal belongings. On main character. Mid-30s, good-looking, athletic, and tired from his trip. He sits by the window. His relief on landing is subtle, but we notice. Suddenly, he hears, "You don't like flying, do you?" The main character turns, looks at the Babbitt clone next to him. Caught, he tenses, holds his armrests in exaggerated fear. No, where'd you get that idea? So, this script in particular was the first screenplay that I was ever taught as a writer. This film is an amazing film, and this script was presented to me as in the context of this is a perfect screenplay. And even as I have read a ton more screenplays and seen a ton more movies, I am still inclined to agree. So I'd love to hear in the chat, does anyone recognize this scene? Do you know what movie this is? Give it a minute for anyone to take their guesses, and then if no one has any guesses, we can go to the next slide, which will reveal the character's name, and then you really will know what movie this is from. I think Sabrina knows, yeah. Let's unredact those names by going to the next slide. That's right, y'all knew. It's John McClane. This is Die Hard 1. The scene goes on in the actual film. There's a great moment where John is reaching for a bag from the overhead compartment. His jacket kind of rides up. We see that he has his firearm on his waist. And then we learn that he's a New York cop. We don't just tell, it's not stated in his introduction. We get mid-30s, good-looking, athletic, tired from his trip. It's the scene work. It's the reveal of the gun, the interaction with the salesman that lets the audience learn that he's a cop. We're engaged. We're hooked. There's that moment of intrigue. I talk a lot about playing in a status quo while you have it. And so that brief moment, even if it's a half beat, where we see that John McClane has a gun, we don't yet know he's a cop. We're right there with the salesman, like, oh shit, he's armed. Then we learn he's a cop. Okay. Then we realize he's a New York cop. Okay. What's a New York cop doing in LA? Well, that's Die Hard. Great movie. Again, really, I highly encourage everyone to check out the screenplay for Die Hard. I think it's a fantastic screenplay to learn from. It was the first one that I really ever truly engaged with in that way. And a great exercise if you're looking to take things to the next level is read the script scene by scene, and then read scene 1, watch scene 1, read scene 2, watch scene 2. This will take a while, but you'll learn a ton about editing and rhythm and what you're seeing on the screen actually looks like on the page. So we've got another one that is a little bit of an older film. It might not be quite as immediately recognizable. And what you'll be seeing here is, sheer variety in how people write their action description lines and write their character lines. Interior 19th floor. Acres of gray steel desk, gray steel filing cabinets, and steel gray faces under indirect light. One wall is lined with glass-enclosed cubicles for the supervisory personnel. It is all very neat, antiseptic, impersonal. The only human tough is supplied by a bank of IBM machines. I think that should be the only human touch, is supplied by a bank of IBM machines, clacking away cheerfully in the background. The main character, it says in voiceover, I work on the 19th floor, Ordinary Policy Department, Premium Accounting Division, Section W, desk number 861. Then we see 861. Like every other desk, it has a small nameplate attached to the side. This one reads, main character's name. Main character's in voiceover says, my name is blank. However, most people call me blank. I've been with Consolidated Life for 3 years and 10 months. I started in the branch office in Cincinnati, then transferred to New York. My take-home pay is $94.70 a week, and there are the usual fringe benefits. Blank is about 30, serious, hard-working, unobtrusive. He wears a Brooks Brothers type suit, which he bought somewhere on 7th Avenue, upstairs. There is a stack of perforated premium cards in front of him, and he is totaling them on the computing machine. He looks off. Electric wall clock shows 5:19. With a click, minute hand jumps to 5:20, and a piercing bell goes off. Main character says, the hours in our department are 8:50 to 5:20. Full shot office, instantly all work stops. Papers are being put away. Typewriters and computing machines are covered, and everyone starts clearing out. Within 10 seconds, the place is empty, except for Blank, still bent over his work, marooned in a sea of abandoned desks. So, anyone recognize this movie? It's one of my favorites. We'll go ahead and say it in the chat if you know what it is. And then we'll unredact this page and see if that jumps anybody's memories. Because I bet some of you have seen this and maybe just don't recognize it without the iconic character name. It's C.C. Baxter, a.k.a. Bud, a.k.a. Buddy Boy, a.k.a. the main character of Billy Wilder's The Apartment. Great comedy. It is a film that is genuinely timeless. It continues to get better with age. Again, another film that I highly recommend. People are open to learning from. I think it's a great example of a romantic comedy. It's a great example of kind of a little bit of a screwball comedy, baked into like just a really potent premise that is, again, genuinely timeless. The fact that this film is like 60 plus years old and it really holds up and is still relatable to the modern day is really incredible, and a great example of a specific character introduction. He's here replacing Bud Baxter in a context that, you know, we kind of get that this guy's things aren't going great for him. But then we start to complicate his life as we get into the actual premise of the movie, and then, you know, things get tougher for old C.C. Bud Baxter. So The Apartment is written by Billy Wilder and his writing partner, I.A.L. Diamond. And then our next one. Oh, this is a fun one, y'all. All right. Exterior Centennial Lane dusk. Blank stands on a placid street in a nondescript subdivision facing the curb. It's fall. Blank is 16 years old, an artfully bedraggled, burnout kid. She winces her eye and shields her eyes from the glare of the sun. The object of her rapt attention is a battered living room set, abandoned curbside by its former owners. There is a fetid-looking leather recliner, a chromed-edged coffee table, and a tasteless latch-hook rug featuring a roaring tiger. In voiceover, the main character says, started with a chair. Interior Bleecker House, molderific basement, night. Flashback, Blank approaches a boy hidden by shadow. He's sitting in an overstuffed chair. She slowly, clumsily lowers herself onto his lap. A 60s Brazilian track plays from a vintage record player. Whispered voice says, do you know how long I've wanted this? Main character says, yeah. Whispered voice says, wizard. Exterior Centennial Lane continued. A dog barks, jarring Blank back to reality. Blank says, quiet, banana. Hey, shut your gob for a second, okay? We see a teacup poodle tethered in the yard a few feet from the abandoned living room set. The dog yaps again. Blank says, this is the most magnificent discarded living room set I've ever seen. She swigs from an oversized carton of juice and wipes her mouth with the back of her hand. Does anyone recognize this film? In fact, we can go ahead and unredact it because this is Juno. Yeah, I think if it had said Sunny D, it would have been a dead giveaway. But otherwise, this is such a fun, specific character introduction. And what I really wanted to highlight here was how much time we spend getting her personality. This does move the story forward because we get the flashback to the sex scene, the conception of the baby that then drives the rest of the story. So even though it doesn't seem like a ton of stuff is happening, it really works. Oh, we're on an ad break, so we'll hang out for a moment. Go ahead and let us know in the chat when the ad break is over. We're back from the ad break. Thank you all for hanging out. The ad breaks go directly to support Nice Hog Productions and help us do cool stuff like this for you all. So thank you. Now, I think that I really want to stress how this scene almost could be a pet the dog moment, if not for that flashback where we see the plot move forward because we get some essential exposition that is crucial to the rest of the story. And the passage of time works that makes sense that it's a flashback. I think it is really important that we introduce Juno independently of being pregnant. To go back to what some of the experts were saying at the very beginning, we heard that Michael Hogg says if you can't introduce a character only by their function, a boss, a mother, a teenager, a customer, because that person's hard to picture and hard to care about. So Juno is not introduced to us as pregnant teen. She's introduced to us with her personality, which she has in spades. Like Diablo Cody creates this character with like a big personality, so memorable. And again, because we're invested in Juno as a character, we then care about the teen pregnancy, and we care about Polly Bleecker, and we care about whatever Jason's character's name is, the creepy adult who like hits on her. It all works. Jason Bateman. That's the actor's name, not the character's name, but it all works. So now I've got another one. I actually should have done this one earlier because I did not redact it. So it's one that I'm not going to redact anyway. It would have been silly to redact because it's so iconic, but many people are saying it's iconic. ECU Video Pixels. 5 young women stand side by side, waiting to be judged, breathless, hopeful. A name is announced. 4 hearts break. The camera zooms across the smiles of losers to find a winner. She bursts into tears, hugs the nearest runner-up. Begin credits. Music, quiet and melancholy, plays over all the opening scenes, leading to the title card. The contest winner cries and hugs the runners-up as she has the tiara pinned to her head. Then, carrying her bouquet, she strolls down the runway, waving and blowing kisses. A 6-year-old girl sits watching the show intently. This is Olive. She is big for her age and slightly plump. She has frizzy hair and wears black-rimmed glasses. She studies the show very earnestly. Then, using a remote, she freezes the image. Absently, she holds up one hand and mimics the waving style of Miss America. She rewinds the tape and starts all over. Again, Miss America hears her name announced and once again breaks down in tears, overwhelmed and triumphant. Amazing, amazing opening scene. Even though Olive is not doing a ton, that's okay. It's right at the beginning of the movie. We're introduced to her as an interesting person doing an interesting thing in an interesting place. She's in the basement. She's watching a pre-recorded tape of Miss America, and she's looping it. She's rewinding and watching it again and again and again with rapt attention. And she's Olive. She's not exactly the type of character that you're picturing has this passion for pageantry. And yet, she does, and that's the movie. Of course, this is Little Miss Sunshine, written by Michael Arndt. Now here's one that's very different. Here's one that is completely different than every other example that I've shown you tonight so far. Fade in. Outskirts of a South Texas railroad yard, San Rafael. A train roars past, revealing in the distance 5 men riding towards camera along the tracks. In close foreground is the back part of a sign. Narrator says, "To most of America in 1913, the age of innocence had arrived, and the stories of the Indian Wars and the Gold Rush and the great gunfighters had become either barroom ballyhoo or front porch reminiscences. But on both sides of the Rio Grande, men still lived as they had in the 70s and 80s. Unchanged men in a changing land. They wear the khaki uniforms of the United States Cavalry. The horses bear the government brand, and the saddles are regulation. Blank, wearing lieutenant's bars, rides slightly ahead of the others. He rides stiffly, always slightly in pain. Blank is a not unhandsome, leather-faced man in his early 40s. A thoughtful, self-educated Top Gun with a penchant for violence who is afraid of nothing, except the changes in himself and those around him. Make no mistake, Blank is not a hero. His values are not ours. He is a gunfighter, a criminal, a bank robber, a killer of men. His sympathies are not for fences, for trolleys and telegraphs or better schools. He lives outside and against society because he believes in that way of life, and if he has a moment of sympathy for others, moments of regret, they are short-lived. He is not a good man, according to the righteous. To them, he is totally bad, and he wouldn't have it any other way. This is not Butch Cassidy. Now, this example, on the page, it's dense, but when you heard it aloud, it kind of flowed. It had rhythm. This writer, when you see who it is, of course, they know what they're doing. But even though it looks dense on the page, when you hear it read aloud, it comes to life. And that is, another great thing to try to really think about is how, not just how does this look on the page, but how does it sound? If there is rhythm and wordplay and melody to the writing, even in a script, that's going to come through as a director or an actor or an editor tries to translate that vision, from page to production to post to the screen. Now, let's go ahead and unredact this one. It's a tough one to guess, and I don't know that the name is necessarily even going to give it away. What if I told you this character's name was Pike Bishop? Does that ring any bells for anyone? That's okay if it didn't. It's a great movie, but not... Yeah, there it is! Cup of Miracle with Wild Bunch. Correct. Nailed it. Shout out Cup of Miracle with the correct answer. That's way to go. That rocks. The Wild Bunch, written by Wallen Green and Sam Peckinpah. Cool introduction. Although that introduction had what might be considered unfilmables, it doesn't matter. This is the first page. This is the main character. That is the time where you should break form a little bit. Getting that sense of Pike Bishop being a bad guy, not being a traditional hero, that tells us so much about what we're in for. And, honestly, it hooks us. Seeing him ride the horse is not that compelling in and of itself. Seeing him ride the horse and knowing about the changing world and the context that the narrator's giving us about the setting, coupled with this little bit of interiority that we're getting from the action description lines, now that's a character. And now I'm hooked, and now I want to see this interesting person doing interesting things in this interesting place. Next one is a really fun scene, a great movie, and another just really memorable scene, I think. This is a different type of introduction to a character. This is real scene work. Interior Toys R Us store, day. Blank at 40 is looking at a dollhouse. He's a wide, thick, coarse-featured big man. Sicilian from Sunnyside. He's spent 15 years in Attica, Joliet, and Marion penitentiaries. He's strictly a cowboy. His natural inclination towards a score is get the guns and let's go. He's been off smack and everything else for 5 years. He's clean and sober. He's the nicest guy on the block and a loving father. If you get in his way, he'll kill you as soon as look at you. If you asked him about the contradictions, he wouldn't know what you were talking about. Close on dollhouse details. It's a 3x6 and 2 feet high. Miniature room sets are inside. His fingers are close the door. He picks it up. Widen. He crosses to a counter and middle-aged clerk. Grab this hero. Yes, sir. You're going to have a happy little girl. 2. I got 2 girls. That's nice. Yeah. And give me those 3 masks there. Clerk takes down Clark Gable, 3-eyed monster, and beautiful lady. Full head rubber masks. Give me Donald Duck, too. A little early for Halloween? Yeah. Halloween's coming early this year. What do I owe you? Now, let me know in the chat if you recognize this scene. There's a clue on this page if you look closely. I'm not going to tell you where. But I also think that this is such a fun character introduction because we get 2 sides of this character right up front, and knowing those 2 sides then informs the dramatic irony of this exchange with the clerk. If we didn't know the duality of this character's kind of persona and the deliberate invocation of those contradictions, this scene's punchline doesn't play because you don't know why he's got these masks. Knowing that he is, he'll kill you as soon as look at you, and he wouldn't get that that's a contradiction about being the nicest guy on the block, lets you know he ain't getting these masks for Halloween, folks. Let me know in the chat if you know what movie this is. Otherwise, we will unredact the name and see if that helps. It might not. He's not the main character of this movie, if that helps. Does it help to know that this character's name is Cerrito, Michael Cerrito? It's Heat, written by Michael Mann. Great movie, great introduction, really fun, complicated character to introduce, and then you put him in a fun, complicated scene. Interesting people doing interesting things in interesting places. The recently out of prison mob guy buying Halloween masks at Toys R Us and a dollhouse to kind of cover up what he's actually there to buy. Great. That's interesting. Again, it leaves the audience wondering what's going to happen next. And that beginning character description, giving us the backstory, makes sure we understand the scope of what's going on in this scene, even if the sales clerk doesn't. And now, that was my last example from produced screenplays. Well, it's a little bit of a tease, but now we're going to look at examples from some annual Blacklist screenplays. So, again, I said it at the top of the show, but the annual Blacklist is a curated list of unproduced screenplays each year. At the end of the year, managers, producers, executives, agents all come together and share information about the best scripts that they read that year that didn't get made. And sometimes those films go on to get made. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they are scripts that are designed to get on this list and build a name for that writer and get attention from the industry, even if that specific project isn't gonna make it. Sometimes those projects are written, the idea of this will never get made, but it'll get buzz, and then it still gets made. So The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, film about Nicolas Cage as Nicolas Cage. It's a Blacklist script. It was kind of a stunt. I don't think they thought the script would get that much buzz or that Nick Cage would go, yeah, I'll do that movie. But he did. So it's great. The Voices is another great example. Now here's an example. This next one, you might immediately clock the movie. This one did get produced. And I mixed feelings on the movie in particular, but I actually thought this introduction was really fun. Exterior City Street Day. A bona fide square-jawed action star. Cool haircut. Cooler sunglasses. Leather jacket. Runs down a city street with a sly smirk and briefcase stuffed with money. Everyone thinks they're the main character in their own life story. He slides across the hood into a muscle car and speeds off. But someone's got to be the bad guy, the overbearing mother, the love interest. Cop chases after him. A beautiful woman swoons. All I'm saying is maybe some of us are supporting characters and someone else is cooler, funnier, action-packed adventure. We rack focus behind the swooning woman to settle on. Random bystander walking through the background. This is Guy. 30s. Well-kept, blue button-up shirt, clean cut. Just an average, nothing, spectacular kind of guy. Sometimes I feel that way. I mean, otherwise my life would make for one boring story. Now, in the chat, we have some hate for Free Guy. I agree. I am not a fan of Free Guy. But I wanted to share this example with you all because I often think there are people that want to write a main character like Guy. Nothing spectacular, just an average guy. And I think this demonstrates one way to actually do that. Because if you just introduce me to an average, nothing spectacular kind of guy, I don't care. I'm bored. I'm not interested. I've seen that before, and it's not dynamic. Now, if you introduce the archetypal action star, he's jacked, he's fit, the badass, and then go, and that's not our hero. Our hero is this guy. The contrast and the context that we're getting introduced to this character, even though he's still kind of a stock character and kind of, it's pretty archetypal, there's more to it because of that juxtaposition. And, for better or worse, this did get made. This is a Blacklist script from 2016, written by Matt Lieberman, and it got produced. It became I won't say a hit movie, but it became a movie, which is an uphill battle in and of itself. So, and again, some of these I think are to give you the context of, this was a 2016 Blacklist script. The film came out fairly recently. So to give you a sense of just how long some of these things can take, that one was a produced screenplay, but now we're going to look at some different examples that are, to my knowledge, as of yet unproduced. Maybe they're in the works. Exterior health food store day. Close on Hannah Abrams. Recently 30, dark-haired, intense, white-knuckling it through life. A deep breath, seemingly preparing for some significant physical trial. Reverse to see that Hannah stands in front of a health food store. We realize the sliding sound is an automatic door. Posh Pacific Northwesterners, self-important in their North Face fleeces, move in and out around her, pushing their carts and hefting bags, vaguely annoyed by her inconvenient placement. She takes another heavy breath, readying herself to go inside. Now, again, interesting people in interesting places doing interesting things. A recently 30, dark-haired woman white-knuckling it through life is specific and is interesting and is relatable. Now, a health food store, not the most interesting location, but the fact that, stepping inside is, might as well be climbing Mount Everest for Hannah. This is a way to do that. Sabrina asks about directing on the page. Yeah, you absolutely can do that, and this is an example of how to do that. I don't put a lot of stock in people's concerns about directing on the page because we're not getting really too much in terms of camera angles. I would say the rack focus in Free Guy I take more of an issue with than Reverse to See. In my opinion, the more sophisticated way to do this would be to just not say Reverse to See. Close on is fine. It's whatever. Those kinds of things are okay, but I also think it's the kind of thing that ultimately, I'm not bothered by it, but it's ultimately superfluous. Because if you just start with Hannah Abrams, recently 30, I'm going to assume that's a close-up. Unless, I have no reason to believe it's not a close-up. Reverse to See, similar, I kind of get it. It's the type of thing where, emerging writers should be more cautious about it, but, done in certain ways, you can absolutely do it where people are not going to be as concerned. It's also the thing where, these scripts, especially for the Blacklist scripts, like I said, are mostly intended to live and die as samples versus, a shooting script, which someone might go through with a fine-tooth comb and take those out or rewrite them. So this was from Pure, written by Catherine Scatina from the 2022 Blacklist. Yeah, that's another great thing. That's why I wanted to pull examples from different genres and different decades to really show you how many different routes you can take with this stuff, and that there isn't necessarily hard and fast rules, but things to kind of weigh, considerations to keep in mind as you craft your own character introductions. Let's check out this next one. I actually think this one's really fun. This one, of all of the unproduced ones that I checked out, this was one where I immediately started to look and see if this movie was getting made. The roar of a moving car that has someplace to fucking be. Interior Disco's estate car. Morning, moving. Flickering dawn light hastens over wide-eyed Clementine, 25, sitting in the back seat. She's Colombian, aged with stress. Her face features a pale shiner and busted lip. A German voice from the front. This isn't exactly the best time to break in some green bitch. Right here. He sniffles, hacks up something questionable. Allergies. The car comes to a stop. Clementine finds Disco's eyes in the rearview mirror staring back. The driver. He's 30, a nobody who wants to keep it that way. He dons a ski mask that'll certainly help. Jake, also 30 and deeply experienced in the ensuing craft. His German green eyes stare back at Clementine. Cover up. Clementine throws on a pair of sunglasses, then veils the bottom half of her face with a skull and bones bandana. Now, I will personally take issue with German green eyes. I just don't like that description. It made me really uncomfortable to read aloud. But otherwise, I really like this scene. I like the introduction to Clementine. I like that she is younger than the other two, but not so much younger that it's a distraction. I like that she is introduced in conflict. They're a car that has someplace to fucking be. They are flying down the freeway. And then she's already got a shiner and a busted lip. She's a scrapper. Then you see that they're about to get up to some kind of crime. They're masking up. They're getting ready. The scene continues. They're pulling out guns. Immediately, we're seeing an interesting person doing an interesting thing in an interesting place. Again, that is the North Star for what you're targeting with your character introductions. This is from Clementine, written by David Lee Hawk, another one from the 2022 Blacklist. Now, let's look for some. That one's pretty intense, right? That's an action movie. Now let's check out something that is maybe a little bit more lighthearted. Interior beautiful suburban house, day 1996. Rebecca, a beautiful middle-aged woman who will be played by an actress that James Cameron will divorce his wife for and marry, if past patterns are to be believed, gets ready for a formal event. She walks into the living room. Hey, Mom, Roger and I have that benefit tonight, and I wanted to wear your diamond necklace. Have you seen it? Old Mary, who is very old, like maybe the oldest lady we've ever seen on screen, is lost in thought, staring out the window at a beautiful sunset. She looks over. Titanic was the ship of dreams. Rebecca sighs, having heard this story 10,000 times before. Dementia is hard, and it affects everyone. She sits down to listen, already bored. Now, Rebecca's introduction is really specific and immediately establishes the tone of this script, the irreverence of this script. I don't necessarily think it's too wordy in this instance, because when you hear the title of the film, it makes so much sense. Removed of the context of what this film is, it's a little disorienting, I'd say. Like, the joke is funny, but I think in a vacuum, it's a little bit hard to understand why the writer's making that choice. Old Mary is purely funny. That's really funny. You could just say an old woman, and we all picture that, but it's not memorable. Maybe the oldest lady we've ever seen on screen is really funny and really specific, and we all know how to picture that. It also helps, again, we're clearly dealing with the Titanic here as like subject of parody. We're picturing Rose from Titanic already. So using that, maybe the oldest lady we've ever seen on screen is just a swing for a laugh line, because the audience, in this case, kind of has a leg up on most other scripts where we know the character that we're picturing from the source material. This script is called James Cameron's Titanic, written by Jen D'Angelo from the 2016 Blacklist. Another great example of like Jen wrote this script. It was on the 2016 Blacklist. She's a phenomenal screenwriter who did the film Quiz Lady, the Hulu movie that came out last year. Again, really, this script, James Cameron's Titanic, as written by Jen D'Angelo, probably won't get produced, but it's a hilarious sample, and it really, I would imagine, helped raise Jen's profile as a writer so that projects like Quiz Lady can happen and get to come to the screen. Now, here's a totally different style. This one is very, very different. Exterior access road near a lake. Night. A shitty 1970s Econoline van comes to a stop. The sound of the Sex Pistols' Submission explodes on the cheap speakers, then cuts silent. The door opens and Brad Lewis, 29, steps out. He's muscular and shaggy-haired in a tattered t-shirt, ratty jeans, and flip-flops. But what makes Brad Lewis unmistakable are his eyes. They gleam with deranged obsessiveness. Brad steps out and walks around to the back of the van. As he walks, he slaps himself in the face. He keeps walking. Another slap. He climbs onto the rear fender of the van. On top of the van, a blue tarp covers something. Brad yanks off the tarp, revealing a long, sleek, racing skull and a couple of oars. Exterior chain link fence near a lake. Minutes later, Brad carries the skull and oars through the sparse woods. He makes his way to a tall chain link fence topped with barbed wire. Brad takes out a pair of wire cutters. A quick glance around, then he starts cutting at the fence. Above his head, a sign, "No trespassing." Exterior Lake Casitas, hours later. Brad's t-shirt, jeans, and flip-flops are scattered lakeside with the wire cutters. Brad's skull glides across the water. From a distance, it's impressive, graceful, nearly serene. But in closer, the picture changes. Brad rows with maniacal energy. In his underwear, he breathes and spits and grunts. His oars cut into the water. Nothing graceful here, just brute and animalistic. Brad's hands are raw and blistered. His gnarled, calloused feet are in the shell's shoes, which are bolted into floorboards. He grunts and rows, grunts and rows. Then, Brad turns his head and pukes into the water, without skipping a beat. Holy shit, right? What a page. This is the first page of this script. This is a writer that I was already a fan of, but had not read this particular screenplay, and I think there's so many fun moments. So, specific action description, specific slug lines. We are introduced to the van. We're introduced to Brad's physicality. We get specifics with the eyes, and then that is a vehicle to tell us that about his deranged obsessiveness. That's something an actor can play and might come across in their energy on screen, but is very helpful to hold the reader's hand and just tell us. But then he's slapping himself in the face. That's a fun surprise. Why is he doing that? That's unexpected. We see him cut through the wires. We see him rowing. But then the switch between the serenity of it and then the obsessiveness again and the animalistic nature and the vomiting. Again, setting up an expectation and then immediately subverting it. That is pretty crazy to do on one page. Now, I'm being told we're in an ad break, so I'm going to hang tight for just a few minutes. This script is The Olympian, written by Tony Tost from the 2016 Blacklist. Tony had a film play at Sundance last year, and I believe it is called... It changed titles a couple times. It's called Americana. It is pretty cool. He comes from a poetry background. He comes from a creative writing background, and he just has a pretty different style, I think, than a lot of folks who kind of start in screenwriting. He came to screenwriting from a different discipline, and I think that really informs his work, and especially just makes his style very different, which I like. Let me know when we're back from the ad break, and we will rock and roll. we're back. So once again, that was The Olympian, written by Tony Tost from the 2016 Blacklist. Great script. That actually was the last example that I have for everyone tonight. So now we're going to move into the open Q&A. If you guys have any questions about character introductions, about screenwriting, or working in entertainment more broadly, happy to answer any questions you might have and dig in a little bit with folks. If you've got questions, fire them off in the chat. We'll give it a few more minutes, and if folks don't have any questions, we can wrap up. But I'm happy to make myself available and dig in if anyone has any questions. Certainly, if anyone's feeling brave enough to present their own character introductions for workshop, we could do that too. Sabrina asks, my least favorite character introduction. I don't know about a least favorite character introduction. That's a great question. I have like specific moments in mind from films, but it's hard to say if that's the character introduction, the performance, the structure of the screenplay specifically. Yeah, hard to say a least favorite character introduction. I'm trying to think of character introductions that I don't like in films that I do like, and I'm coming up kind of blank. I'm not going to say our own project, no. Carson asks, these are some awesome examples. What was the hardest bad writing habit of yours to break? Okay, so a hard bad writing habit to break, for me personally, is my scenes being too dialogue heavy. I definitely I'm a dialogue first writer. I think that strength of dialogue lends itself to performances, and like that's kind of how my scenes are structured. But I think that there's a different school of thought that basically is like the scene should be able to play without dialogue, and then the dialogue supports the scene. And that's definitely something that, as I try to do things outside of comedy, that action description is like fairly stronger. So could be a little bit different. Just depends. SG asks, show my favorite of mine. Well, I will read one of my favorite character descriptions of my own here. I will go into my own material. I'll read a couple for y'all. Let's see. I've got this one. I've got this one. And I'll read from, let's see. How about this one? Okay. So I'm going to share a couple of my own character introductions per the request in the chat. You won't be able to see it on screen, but I think it is pretty fun. Let's see, where are these introduced? Okay. I'll read, these are two character introductions back to back. They're not perfect. I would say I wouldn't put these up against any of the examples that I've shared with you tonight. Those are all writers who are phenomenal, and I'm not quite there yet on my own journey, but here's an example. Evan Wilson, 22, offbeat underachiever, takes a mean toke from a pink seashell bowl and coughs hard. Still coughing, they pass the bowl back to Michelle Muttley, 23, indie rock drummer and drama school dropout. So the scene goes on, but now I've introduced 2 characters. They're doing an action, and they have an interesting prop, the pink seashell bowl. We get a little bit of contrast between the two, but ultimately there's not that much contrast. That's from a Superbad inspired kind of stoner noir. Here's a really fun one. Simple. Pirate Eye kicks open the door to his milquetoast office. He immediately accosts his secretary, Mrs. Elderberry, 21, old soul. Simple. 21, old soul for a character named Mrs. Elderberry. I've set up an expectation, then I've subverted it. You kind of have a sense of what this character could be, but it's also fairly broad so that we're not limited to just like one specific interpretation. And I'll give you, let's see what other ones I have that I like. I actually have one that I really like, so let me grab it. Oh, maybe it's earlier in the script. Yes, okay, it's in this. This is a great. All right, so this is just one line. I guess what we're seeing here is I'm pretty lean with my character introductions. There's literally one sentence. Leo Banks, 20s, nepo baby nincompoop, blows a raspberry. Boom. Interesting description of his character. You kind of get. Sure, he's a stock character in some ways, but nepo baby nincompoop is so fun to say. It's very specific. And then the action of blowing a raspberry. We get that this is like a douche in his 20s. I'll do one more of my own, and then we can move on from mine. Sandy joins Matilda Palmer, 15, dressed in a slightly too big department store power suit in the back seat of the limo. So, a 15-year-old in an interesting place, backseat of the limo, doing an interesting thing, wearing a big power suit that doesn't fit her. Again, simple. It's not too long, not too crazy. I really don't personally. I'm really lean on my character introductions. I think compared to some of the stuff that we've seen here. I think less is more. Miranda asks, tips to make characters more three-dimensional. I think a great way to make a character more three-dimensional is to think about the different aspects of the character that you're going to see. To go back to Juno, for instance, Juno is not just a big personality, quirky teen. She's not just a pregnant teen. She's a musician and kind of like a beatnik and kind of wise beyond her years. And we see her in 3 different contexts. We see Juno with her family, with J.K. Simmons, with that kind of, she's in one context. We see her with Michael Cera's character, Polly Bleeker, in a different context, as a love interest, as someone with a love interest. And then we see her with Jason Bateman and the family that is going to adopt her child, and we see her in a totally different context. Now, all 3 of those different contexts are important to the movie and come together to create the totality of the character and demonstrate her interiority beyond just like stock character of pregnant teen. But it's those 3 different lenses through which we can engage with her, and in some movies they're more disparate, that it becomes really interesting. Similarly, like I'll use John Wick 1 as an example. We see John Wick as the loving widower. We see him as the friend and ally to Willem Dafoe's character and to Winston and to Chiron. And then we see him as the ruthless killing machine, the Baba Yaga. And seeing all 3 of those makes him this guy that we care about. If he just is the Baba Yaga in scene 1 and he's just kicking ass from the moment go, we don't care. It's fine. But to see him broken and to see what he cares about and to see that ripped away from him, and then to see his support system and the people in his life and like his relationships, like I said, with Willem Dafoe's character, the sniper, his relationship with the local cop who checks in on him, his relationship with the cleaners who come to deal with the people going after him after he's fucking kicked their asses and killed them all and has to clean up his house. Seeing those different aspects to the character, and again, these are 2 examples where like all those kind of coalesce to create the totality of the character. It really works. And I encourage folks to think about their characters in those at least three different aspects, and be selective in the aspects that you choose. Ideally, you do want them to kind of all feed together and create, a fully rounded person. Hell, think about yourself as an example. You can look at your life in one context of child of your parents. You could look at yourself as an independent adult with a job and maybe a relationship and whatever. And then you also are probably an individual with interiority and aspirations and things that you want to do, maybe as an artist, maybe as a screenwriter. You think about that old meme where it's like, this is how the world sees me. This is how I see myself. This is how my friends see me. This is how my teachers, there's like the different meme. That you should have one of those for every character. It's extremely helpful to know, how does this character see themselves? How are they seen by their peers? How are they seen by their enemies? Where do those things align and where do they not align? Steve asks in the chat, John Wick end stream. I would love to do another John Wick stream or just watch party. One of my favorite things we've ever done is we watched, in the anticipation of John Wick 4, we watched John Wick 1, John Wick 2, John Wick 3, like one a day. And those movies are fantastic. They're great world building. They're different from each other. The 4th movie is totally different than the 1st movie. But I think that's it's fun. And I think of them actually as like very similar to, you think of like Alien and Aliens. Alien is a 10 out of 10 horror film. Aliens is a 10 out of 10 action film. They're both sci-fi, but that's more of like set dressing. The actual structure and genre of the movie, the first one's a horror film. The second one is an action film. Partially because the first one is a 10 out of 10. How do you do that again? You don't. So they did something different, and they did that really well too. That's what the John Wick franchise did. You have the first one, you have the second one, which genuinely feels like part 2 of the first movie, not necessarily a full sequel. You have John Wick 3, which does feel like for the first time the world is expanding, the story is expanding. We're moving past the initial inciting incident of John Wick 1. Like John Wick 2 relies on the events of John Wick 1 more than any of the others. And then 3 and 4 are kind of their own thing, a little bit different, a little bit more pulpy, a little bit more genre-based. Those are great movies, and it's also a great way to think of like fun character introductions, because think about how many characters those movies churn through. You don't think there's that many, but think about every guy that he fights with that is a memorable fight. Think about the guy in the library at the beginning of John Wick 3 who towers over him and they fight about the books. That's a character. He's memorable. I immediately can think of that guy and conjure that scene in my head. Even though he doesn't last more than 5 minutes. Think about the doctor he goes to get help from. The friend of the main guy that wants to take his car and kills the dog that he kills in the pool in the first one. There's like all these little moments where making those characters specific and memorable, sometimes it comes from the way that John kills them. But sometimes it's also just like the type of character that you're seeing. There's a lot that you can learn from in those films and love them. If you're looking for the script to John Wick 1, it's probably circulating under the name John Wick now, but it was written under the name Scorn, and they hadn't cast Keanu yet when they wrote it. John Wick in that first script is described as grizzled and gray and in his late 60s. And then once they cast him, they kind of rebuilt the character around him. He's a little bit younger. His wife's name was not Helen in the original script. A lot of stuff kind of, was remolded around the performer. And I would wager that that's true in a lot of cases. I would bet as much as Juno is Juno on the page, I bet Elliot Page's casting brought a whole different element to that character. You can't, there in a lot of cases the performer is just bringing something to the table to bring those characters to life. That's not just an expression; it's literally what they're doing. So your descriptions need to be malleable enough that they're specific enough that you can picture the character in your head and trust that the director or the casting director or whoever is going to execute on that and bring them to life. But you also need to be malleable enough that you're open to different interpretations of what this character could be. I bet they weren't picturing Keanu Reeves as John Wick when they wrote it, but once he said he was interested, that probably ripped the whole thing wide open. That's why the movie got made. That's why it is a blockbuster franchise where they've done 4, they're gonna do a spin-off, and Lionsgate is begging them to do John Wick 5. And that comes from the casting, and that comes from shaping that titular character. And actually, John Wick is just such a good example because even though we meet him, and we get to meet him through all these different aspects, it also is still, to go back to those very early examples of like the different ways you could introduce a character, as suggested by Doug Ebach, advertising. We hear about the Baba Yaga. Even though we've met John Wick, they say, oh, don't worry about John Wick. You got to worry about the Baba Yaga. We hear the pencil story, all this stuff. You get the scene, the iconic scene in that first movie that I think the entire franchise was built on, where they call the boss and they're saying what the boss's son did. And then they say like, well, whose dog did he kill? Whose car did he steal? And they say it was John Wick's. And he just hangs up the phone because he knows that's a death wish. They're done. Well, as soon as, and like that is, we've met John Wick at that point. We spent a lot of the movie with him, but we're still, the arc of the movie builds to that, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back moment. And this is building that by hyping up the Baba Yaga, killing people with a pencil, doing all this kind of stuff. We're already seeing that in action, but the legend of John Wick is building. We're getting hyped to know like, oh, we ain't seen nothing yet. And then we have 3 more movies where they just up the ante every time. Honestly, I can't think of a more crowd-pleasing franchise that unites fans of all genres than John Wick. Sci-fi fans, horror fans, action fans, comedy fans, romance fans. There's something for everyone in these movies, and they're just a lot of fun and really well done. So, yeah, can't speak highly enough about those kinds of movies, and I encourage folks to apply that passion and enthusiasm. If you have a movie that you feel the way that I feel about John Wick, learn from it. Read the script. Bring that to your own work. Make your version of that movie. We're seeing a lot of John Wick likes. We just had The Fall Guy. We've got Monkey Man. We have Bullet Train. A lot of these are folks who were involved in the John Wick franchise, but there's a clear market for that type of movie now. The revenge thriller, the stylish revenge thriller. And, you can draw a straight line from John Wick to Monkey Man, and that's okay, because Monkey Man is still showing us something we haven't seen before. And so I encourage folks to make stuff that is a love letter to the things that you love. Take all of your different influences and bring them together. That's how you will create memorable characters. This is the thing that people will say of like, oh, don't base a character off of someone you know. Base them off of 2 or 3 people you know and create one new, unique, fictional character that can draw from these different real influences. And I'd say that's a great way to develop a character, and it's a great way to develop a concept for a story, too. Steve is in the chat pitching John Wick in Space, a John Wick Christmas Carol, John Wicker Man. Any of those as a concept, like, yeah, that's cute, it's a pun, but like you actually dig in and go, okay, what does this look like to combine those 2 movies? You then have an original idea that maybe is marketable. So I encourage folks to really, pursue that kind of stuff. Unless anyone has any other questions, I think that's going to wrap up our Q&A portion of the evening. Well, thank you everyone for joining the stream. You can subscribe to the Nice Hog newsletter at nicehog.substack.com. You'll be the first to hear about streams like this, our latest projects. We have scripts in active development that are placing in contests and festivals. Secret Menu Beauty Pageant, our current calling card short film, is on its festival run and getting into new festivals every week. We also do pop-up live streams that we don't advertise as much, where we play games and hang out. And all of this and more at nicehog.substack.com. If you want to follow us, of course, we're here on Twitch at twitch.tv/nicehoglive. But we're also at nicehogstagram on Instagram, at nicehogtweets on X/Twitter, and at nice.hog on TikTok. If you want to check out our website, we're nice-hog.com. And if you're interested in being a part of what we're building, or if you have questions for us, if you're watching this stream later and you want to pick our brains, or you have a topic that you want us to cover in a future Nice Hog Presents Screenwriting Mechanics session, hit us up at info@nice-hog.com. Subject line, mechanics. I want to thank Carson Bailey for helping me run the technical side of tonight's class. I want to thank everyone who tuned in, either live or watching after the fact. Your support means the world to us. We wouldn't do it if not for y'all. And I want to give a shout out to everyone who was jumping in with great questions in the chat. Sabrina, Steve, I think that was Joe, Miranda, Michael. We've got a lot of great folks. Thank you all for being here. This was our first go at this, so great to see how it turned out, and we hope to be back with more Nice Hog Presents Screenwriting Mechanics in the near future. So for Nice Hog, this is Frankie Campisano. Signing off. Thanks for being here.